Hello everybody and welcome to Mr. Stansfield's Education Videos. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to play around with the color and contrast of your planet. So once you've got your planet on its own layer here, layer 1, I would actually recommend renaming that. So that's going to be planet, layer, and then that way we kind of know that's what's going on. You can move that layer around kind of on that background once you've created its own layer. But what we want to do is actually select this planet layer and then go up to image adjustments. Now we have all of these things that we can do that will change the way that this image looks. I recommend playing around with color contrast, vibrance, hue saturation, color balance, photo filter, invert, maybe shadow highlight. And using a combination of those. I probably wouldn't recommend the other ones that I didn't mention, but let's go ahead and jump right into hue saturation. I think this is going to be one of the easiest ones to play around with. And the first thing you can do is grab this hue slider and drag it around. You can change the color and the saturation. If you bring it up, it's going to make it more saturated, and if you bring it down, it's going to make it less saturated. Basically, more black and white to the left, more colorful to the right, and then the lightness is going to change the brightness of the photo, essentially. So you can have a really dark planet or a little bit of a lighter planet. So this hue saturation panel, I think, is going to be our friend. The other thing, like I said, any of these here, maybe a shadow highlight. This is going to be an interesting one. Play around with it. Use the preview on and off. Here, I actually think this particular photo, I don't think will benefit from a shadow slider adjustment necessarily. I think I like the contrast of this image, but maybe bringing those highlights down a little bit, maybe you could adjust the color. So play around with any of these. Image adjust brightness and contrast, increase your contrast, decrease your brightness. You could have this dark planet. There's lots of options here. So play around up there. The next thing that I would recommend playing around with is copying the planet layer. And you can do that by clicking and dragging the planet down to this little box next to the trash can in the layer panel. Or if you select the planet and then hit Command J, remember that's going to make a copy as well. Then just change the blending mode. So if you change the blending mode, over here you're going to have some different options that come about from the different blending modes. I would recommend, wow, that one's pretty cool, going through, seeing what each one does, right? In this case, not much is happening when I choose some of them. Nothing's happening when I choose some of them. Some things are happening when I choose those. So you just kind of see which of these layer blending modes. When you find one that you like, what was it? Exclusion? Was that the one? Yeah, that one's pretty cool. So once you've done that, you want to merge the layer after each adjustment. So hold the control key down and then select the planet layer here, and that'll select both layers. Then you can go to layer and then merge layers. And so you keep the background, but the planet copy layer just becomes its own. So the planet layer basically becomes one layer. So you want to merge those two layers together after each adjustment. Now, the other thing you can do is go to filter. There's so many filters up here. You can play around with them all. I don't recommend going into the filter gallery. The filter gallery will show you all of the filters, but it will also totally freeze and crash your computer. I haven't actually been able to successfully use the filter gallery, even on my fastest, most advanced computers. And so I would recommend playing around one at a time and seeing what happens. One thing that I thought was pretty cool was this radial blur I was playing around with, and this is something that reminded me a little bit of a Jupiter type planet. You can change the amount of the radial blur by clicking and dragging the slider up, and it just creates this sort of stormy look to the planet. Now, I wouldn't recommend centering the radial, I wouldn't recommend centering the radial blur, and so use this off X, off Y to do that. That's quite a bit that's happening right there. You just want this center right here to be a little bit off center. Okay. Now this would be a great one to use in a blending mode. So I'm actually going to hit cancel, and I'm going to make another copy, right? Control J to make a copy, and then I'm going to do the filter on this copy. So I'm going to go blur and then radial blur, and I'm just going to go ahead and click the defaults because my internet's a little slow at the moment. I'm going to click OK, and then you can see here if I change the blending mode now, that's going to add some of those streaks, but it leaves some of the details. So as you kind of change your blending mode here, you're trying all of these different things. You get some of the effect of that sort of streakiness, but it's not all of it, right? So you could try just saturation or just luminosity, maybe. Right? There's some options. So playing around with a combination of the filters and these sort of blending modes. Once you've found something that you like, go ahead and again select the two, and then layer, merge layers. Now this image is a little bit too light for me, so I'm going to go back into my adjustments here, and I'm going to go into hue saturation, and I'm going to just bring my lightness down a little bit here, my saturation up, and I'm going to change my hue a little bit. I think I liked it being kind of reddish. There you go. There's a little bit of blue here, and maybe that's like the oceans, tiny oceans in this planet. Something like that looks pretty good, and then maybe let's go ahead and actually increase our contrast a little bit. So maybe get our contrast to bump up a little bit, something like that. Good. And so keep working this. If something doesn't work, use your history to go back. And those are the 3 avenues that I would encourage you to explore. Image adjustments for sure, try these. Use a filter, or use a filter in combination with a blending mode by changing the blending mode of a second planet copy, right, or a copy of the planet. Once I've done that, maybe I'll just delete that and I'll keep that planet layer named like that. So those are the ways that I would encourage you to explore and play around. There's so many options. I didn't go into many of these, but there's so many options under the filter. Play around with those. Have some fun.